Hello everyone, my name is Luke. Welcome to this episode of the Outdoor Gear Review. What I have here today is a stove from NatureHike. A few months ago, I was looking around for new products that you all may be interested in, and I came across this. When you see this stove, you're going to say, hey, I've seen this before. And that's because there's about 1 million different versions of this stove out there. There's absolutely nothing unique to this stove. While that sounds like a negative, at the same time, it's not really, because when you have a product that's mass-produced, the price is low, and the price for this stove is very budget friendly. This is the carrying case for the NatureHike foldable camp stove. The lid pops off just like so. And here is the stove itself. You have 3 pot supports, you have 3 legs. This is the hose, here's the adjuster. You have an electric igniter down at the bottom. With the pot support and the legs, they fold out just like so. The legs at the bottom then extend. Check that out. That is the NatureHike stove. So what you have here, everyone, is a canister stove. The price of this is $20. I mentioned before that this is budget friendly, and yes, it certainly is. The weight of the entire kit with the carry box is 10 ounces. The weight of the stove itself is 9 ounces. This is made from a combination of stainless steel, you have some aluminum, and also some brass. When it comes to the dimensions of this stove, you're looking at 2.75 inches tall. And with the pot supports from edge to edge here at the front, this is 5 inches. The furthest point is 6.5 inches. With the distances between the pot supports, this can easily support 8-inch pans. The hose itself is 17 inches long. The company claims the output to be around 3,000 watts, which translates to 10,236 BTUs. So let me go ahead and show you all how to use this stove. So right here, this is where it attaches to the fuel canister, and it simply screws on. Just like so. Down at the bottom, you have the electric ignition. Okay, so let's go ahead and fire this up real quick. This is where you turn it on. This is the adjuster. With that quick boil there, that took roughly 3.5 minutes, something like that. The best performance that I've gotten out of this stove in the best real-world conditions is basically 2 minutes and 36 seconds for 12 ounces of water. In the best of conditions, that's what you're looking at as far as performance goes. When it comes to the efficiency of the stoves that I test out, this is something that I do not pay much attention to. This is an area that a lot of people have questions, but unfortunately, there's no way to answer this question accurately when it comes to a stove. Any sort of stove. It doesn't matter if it's canister, alcohol, and so on. And that's because of the variables. Anytime that you do a test, the results are based upon those very specific variables. And when you go into the outdoors, that's the one thing that you cannot control, the variables. There's simply too many variables in play to give an accurate result. For an example, if I performed a test today, the results that I would have would not be results that you can mimic again. And that's because there's so many different variables, and they're all fluid, they're all changing all the time. So in the end, your performance results would be different than mine. And that's the case in every single scenario. Plus, my friends, there's something else that you need to consider. When it comes to canister stoves like this, most stoves are highly inefficient when they're running wide open. But if you crank it down to medium or low, the efficiency goes up. So how you run the stove will have an additional impact. It's an additional variable to the ultimate efficiency question. Many people think that a standardized test would be easy to come up with, but that's simply not the case. There's just too many variables. The stoves, the regulators, I mean, there's just too many variables out there, including air temperature, wind speed, fuel temperature. I mean, it just goes on and on. In the end, the point is this. Anytime that you see someone claim an efficiency level, a rating, it's nonsense. It means absolutely nothing in the real world. With this little stove here, I've been testing this out for a couple of months now, and here are the pros that I have for it. So first off, the price is good. For $20, in my opinion, this stove is worth $20. The performance is worth $20. The overall quality is good for the money. The overall sturdiness of the stove itself, the construction, the materials, is worth the money. The stove offers good performance, and at the same time, the stove does an excellent job with simmering. It's easy to set up, it's easy to break down. The legs are easy to deploy. The stove cools quickly after use. With the leg supports and the pot supports, it creates a very stable platform for your pots, cups, and pans. Speaking of the pot supports, you can see that they're jagged. Those create an excellent skid-resistant surface. So if you put a pan on there, a pot on there, it has a tendency to stay put. It doesn't slide around very much. As I mentioned before, this can support pots and pans up to 8 inches while giving you a good cooking experience. Another pro that I have for this stove is the adjuster. It's excellent. You slightly turn it, the stove comes on. You can turn it all the way up. You can simmer if you want to. It really does work well, and it has good resistance to it. The electronic igniter works well. You all saw how it took maybe 5 or 6 times to get it going, and that's pretty typical with stoves like this. With any stove that has an igniter, that is going to be the weak point. Those are finicky, and it's the case with most stoves. While it may take a few clicks to get it going, it does get going, and I've never had an issue with it not. And that, folks, takes us over to the cons for this stove. And the first con that I have is sturdiness. While the overall build quality is good, the sturdiness is adequate. When you compare this to more expensive high-end stoves, there's a huge difference in overall feel. There's a difference in overall quality. So when you compare this to like an MSR stove or a Soto stove, something similar, you can tell the difference. And also there's a performance difference. But the thing you have to keep in mind, this is 20 bucks. This doesn't cost $100. And that makes it easy to look past the differences in overall sturdiness and quality. The next con that I have for this stove is that it doesn't feature a regulator that's designed for cold weather. And for the money, I wouldn't expect it to. If you're willing to spend $100, you're going to get better cold weather performance. If not, this still works. It still works. You have to keep the fuel warm, that's the key. But you could definitely get it to work in cold conditions. Just like today. To be honest, it's not all that cold. It's about 35 degrees. It feels good. And even at 35 degrees, you saw the performance of this stove with somewhat warm fuel. In other words, the overall performance is not bad. Again, it's all about the fuel and keeping it warm. The next point that I want to talk about is the overall performance of this stove. The company claims 3,000 watts, which is roughly 10,200 BTUs. I do not think this is accurate. I think it's lower than that. And I base this upon my experiences with other stoves that are around the 10,000 BTU range. This takes over 5 minutes to boil 1 liter of water, whereas with higher end stoves, they can boil 1 liter of water in about 3 minutes. So there is a difference here. Overall, for 20 bucks, in my opinion, the performance of this is very good. But there's something askew from the stated BTUs with this stove. It's off by just a little bit. One big problem for this stove is overall performance in the wind. The company claims that this features a windshield, that it's windproof, wind resistant. All of that is nonsense. None of it's true. And in fact, this stove does not have a windshield, even though the company says it does. When I fired up this stove initially, there was a slight breeze and you can hear the spitting and sputtering. And that's because there's absolutely nothing with this stove that is going to shield the flame from breeze or wind. In the end, the claims about this being windproof are 100% BS. You will need a windscreen if you're going to use this in windy conditions or even in breezy conditions. Overall, my thoughts on this stove are as follows. I believe this to be a relabel. Let me explain what that means. NatureHike went out to a company that makes this stove. The company made the stove and they slapped the NatureHike logo on there. Many companies do this. This is nothing new. And that explains why I've seen this stove before. And that explains why you have likely seen this stove before, because there's a million different variations of this. Some are the same, some are slightly different, some have windscreens, some don't. This one does not. There is absolutely nothing unique to this stove. Some stoves are a little bit cheaper. Some are a little bit more expensive. Are they different? No, not really. With that in mind, and going back to the description when it's talking about windproofness, this is what I think has happened. NatureHike went to a manufacturer, they slapped a logo on there, and NatureHike has taken the generic description for other stoves and has used it, and that's why they talk about this stove specifically having a windshield. The thing is, it doesn't. It doesn't. And this stove is easily influenced by the wind. So everyone, that pretty much wraps it up for my review of this stove. Overall, for the money, it's not bad. Let me put it to you this way. The overall performance of this stove is good for the money. The overall quality of this stove for the money is good. The overall weight of this stove is good, especially for the money. The factors that you need to keep in mind is this: poor wind resistance, poor performance in the cold due to the regulator. And also, there is absolutely nothing unique about this stove. There are so many versions of this. I mean, folks, you all have likely seen I mean, 50 different variants of this on Amazon alone. In the end though, because this is a mass-produced product, you could buy it for 20 bucks. If it wasn't mass-produced, that wouldn't be the case. So all in all, I like this stove. For 20 bucks, this is a good stove. I've had no issues with it. I've never had it fail to ignite. It has always worked. And I have to say that I like the design of this overall. I always have. Again, I've seen variants of this. I have variants of this. I have one version where the legs are actually welded into place. They do not open up. I reviewed that a long time ago, and I don't remember the brand actually, but in the end, it doesn't matter. You've seen one, you've seen them all for the most part. Again, there can be slight variances, but all in all, it's not a bad stove. Make sure to comment down below and let me know, what do you all think about this stove? New to the market. New to the market. New for NatureHike, not new for anyone else. But yeah, if you have any experience with this stove, comment down below. Again, everyone, I think the best way to summarize this is it's good for the money. Good for the money. If you found this episode helpful, you can hit the thumbs up. You can support here on YouTube or on Patreon. Wolfpack, I appreciate you. Strength and honor. Bye for now.